Why do you eat like you're being punished? The question hung in the air of the vast dining room like a ghost that refused to leave. Harrison Caldwell, 73 years old and worth more than most small towns, froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. In 15 years, no one, not his staff, not his lawyers, not even his own reflection, had dared to ask him that. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She stood in the doorway, her mother's cleaning cart visible behind her, wearing a faded yellow dress and shoes that had seen better days. Her name was Lily Morales, and she had no idea she'd just cracked open a door Harrison had welded shut a lifetime ago. Harrison Caldwell hadn't always eaten alone. Once, this same mahogany table in his Savannah mansion had been filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm chaos of family. But that was before the accident, before the silence became his only companion, before guilt became the knife he used to cut his food, and loneliness became the plate he served it on. Every evening at exactly 6:30, Harrison would sit at the head of that enormous table designed for 12, surrounded by empty chairs that seemed to multiply in the candlelight. His housekeeper, Rosa Morales, would serve him meals fit for royalty, and he would eat them like a man serving a life sentence. No music, no television, just the sound of silver against china and the echo of his own breathing in a room too big for one person's sorrow. But on this particular Thursday in March, Rosa had brought her daughter to work. The school had closed early due to a broken heating system, and with no one to watch Lily, Rosa had no choice. "She'll be quiet as a mouse, Mr. Caldwell," Rosa had promised, her accent thick with worry. "You won't even know she's here." Rosa had been wrong. Lily had wandered through the mansion's corridors like Alice in a peculiar wonderland, her curiosity pulling her toward the soft glow of the dining room. And there she'd found him, a man surrounded by more food than 3 people could eat, sitting alone in a room built for celebration, looking like the saddest king in the saddest kingdom she'd ever seen. Children have a way of seeing through the walls adults build around themselves. They ask the questions polite society has learned to swallow. And Lily Morales, with her wide brown eyes and her head tilted slightly to the side, had just asked the one question that would change everything. I don't understand what you mean," Harrison finally managed, his voice rusty from disuse during meals. Lily stepped closer, her small feet barely making a sound on the Persian rug. "My mama says food tastes better when you share it with people you love. But you're eating all by yourself in this big, big room. It looks like you're being punished, like when I have to eat dinner in my room when I've been bad." Something twisted in Harrison's chest, something that felt dangerously close to the pain he'd spent 15 years trying to bury. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his fork. The Chilean sea base on his plate suddenly looked like exactly what it was, expensive loneliness dressed up with lemon and capers. "Where's your mother?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "She's cleaning the library. She told me to wait in the kitchen, but I heard music." "There's no music playing. Not that kind of music," Lily said, moving even closer. "The sad kind. The kind that doesn't make noise, but you can still hear it if you pay attention. My abuela used to say sad people play the quietest songs." Harrison felt something crack inside him, a fissure in the dam he'd built around his heart. This child, this unexpected little prophet in a yellow dress, had somehow heard what he'd spent 15 years trying to silence. "You should go back to the kitchen," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Okay," Lily agreed, turning to leave. But at the doorway she paused. "Mr. Caldwell, my mama makes the best tres leches cake on Fridays. Maybe food wouldn't taste so much like punishment if you didn't eat it alone." And then she was gone, leaving Harrison Caldwell sitting at his table for 12, surrounded by ghosts and questions he'd sworn never to answer. But something had shifted. After 15 years of self-imposed isolation, after 15 years of treating every meal like penance for sins he couldn't forget, a child's simple question had done what nothing else could. It had made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd been punishing the wrong person all along. The fork felt heavier in his hand now, the silence felt louder, and for the first time in 15 years, Harrison Caldwell looked at the empty chairs around his table and felt something other than the familiar ache of deserved solitude. He felt curiosity about what might happen if he said yes to tres leches cake on a Friday. Before we continue, this is very important for our channel. If this story is drawing you in, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any outcome. And write in the comments what country you're listening from. Your support helps us keep bringing these stories that touch the heart. That night, Harrison couldn't sleep. He lay in his king-sized bed, another piece of furniture far too large for one person, staring at the ceiling of his master bedroom, while Lily's question echoed through his mind like a song he couldn't forget. "Why do you eat like you're being punished?" Because he was being punished. Because he deserved to be punished. Because 15 years ago, on a rainy October night, he'd made a choice that had cost him everything that mattered. Harrison rose from bed at 3 in the morning and walked through the dark hallways of his mansion, past portraits of people who no longer visited, past rooms he'd locked and never entered. He found himself standing outside the door at the end of the east wing, the door he'd forbidden Rosa or anyone else to open. His daughter's room, frozen in time, exactly as Margot had left it the night she'd stormed out, 23 years old and furious, telling him she never wanted to see him again. "You care more about your money than you care about people, Dad," she'd said, her voice breaking. "Thomas isn't after your fortune. He loves me, but you'll never believe that, because you don't understand what love looks like anymore. Not since Mom died." Harrison had stood his ground. Thomas Beckworth came from nothing, a mechanic's son from the wrong side of Savannah with big dreams and empty pockets. Harrison had built his commercial real estate empire from scratch, and he knew an opportunist when he saw one. He'd given Margot an ultimatum: leave Thomas or leave the family. She'd chosen Thomas, and Harrison, stubborn and certain he was protecting his only child from a fortune hunter, had let her go. He'd changed his will, cut her off, convinced himself that she'd come crawling back when reality hit, and Thomas couldn't provide the life she deserved. But Margot hadn't come back. And 3 months later, Harrison received the call that shattered what remained of his world. A car accident on Highway 17, rain-slicked roads. Thomas had died instantly. Margot had survived just long enough to deliver their baby girl, premature, fragile, fighting for life in a neonatal intensive care unit. Harrison had raced to the hospital, his heart full of apologies and desperate love, ready to beg his daughter's forgiveness, ready to tell her he'd been wrong about everything. But he'd arrived 17 minutes too late. Margot had died without knowing her father was coming, without hearing him say he was sorry, without knowing that he'd realized too late that she'd been right. He had forgotten what love looked like. The baby, his granddaughter, had survived. For 6 days, Harrison had sat beside her incubator, watching this tiny miracle fight for every breath, praying to a God he wasn't sure listened to men like him. He'd named her Grace, because if anything deserved that name, it was this child who'd survived what should have been impossible. On the 7th day, Grace had opened her eyes. The doctor said it was a good sign. Harrison had allowed himself to hope. Perhaps this was his second chance. Perhaps he could pour all the love he'd failed to give his daughter into this precious granddaughter. But on the 8th day, social services arrived with news that crushed that hope like glass under a boot. Thomas's sister, Claire Beckworth, had filed for custody. She was 28, single, working as a teacher in Charleston, living in a modest apartment, but she was blood family, and Thomas's will had been clear. If anything happened to him and Margot, Claire was to raise their child. Harrison had fought. He'd hired the best lawyers money could buy, argued that he could provide everything a child could need: the finest schools, the best health care, a life of comfort and opportunity. But the judge had sided with Claire. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge had said, "this isn't about what money can buy. Your daughter died estranged from you. Her will specifically requested that her child be raised away from your influence. I have to honor her wishes." Those words had destroyed him. His own daughter had hated him enough to ensure her child would never know him, and he'd deserved it. Harrison had been granted visitation rights, supervised visits twice a month. For 3 months, he'd shown up at Claire's modest Charleston apartment, bringing expensive gifts that Grace was too young to appreciate, sitting awkwardly while Claire watched him like a hawk protecting her nest. Then one day, Claire had moved. No forwarding address. His lawyers had tracked her down. She'd relocated to Portland, Oregon, as far from Savannah as she could get while staying in the continental United States. She hadn't violated any laws. She'd simply exercised her right to move. Harrison could have fought harder, could have hired investigators, filed more motions, demanded his visitation rights be enforced, but something in him had broken. His daughter's final message had been clear: stay away. Who was he to ignore her wishes now, when he'd ignored everything she'd wanted when she was alive? So he'd let Grace go, let his granddaughter disappear into a life without him. And he'd sentenced himself to this, eating alone in a mansion full of memories, surrounded by wealth that couldn't buy back a single moment, punishing himself one silent meal at a time for being the kind of man who'd valued money over love. For 15 years, this had been his penance. For 15 years, this had felt right and just and deserved. Until an 8-year-old girl in a yellow dress asked him why he ate like he was being punished, and suddenly, his carefully constructed prison of guilt felt less like justice and more like cowardice. Harrison placed his hand on Margot's bedroom door, but didn't open it. Not yet. He wasn't ready, but something had shifted. For the first time in 15 years, he wondered if maybe his daughter wouldn't have wanted this for him. If maybe, somewhere, she'd want him to forgive himself. If maybe it wasn't too late to learn what love looked like again. Friday came with the kind of spring sunshine that makes Savannah look like a painting, golden light filtering through Spanish moss, azaleas blooming in riots of pink and white. The the air thick with the promise of something about to change. Harrison sat in his study, pretending to review contracts, but his mind kept drifting to the clock. 6:30 was approaching. Rosa would be setting the table. And somewhere in his kitchen, if Lily hadn't been exaggerating, there was tres leches cake. He hadn't told Rosa he'd be joining them. If joining was even what he was doing, the idea felt absurd. He was Harrison Caldwell, who'd dined with senators and CEOs, who'd closed million-dollar deals over meals at the finest restaurants in Atlanta and New York. And here he was, nervous about having cake with his housekeeper and her 8-year-old daughter. At 6:15, Rosa knocked on his study door. "Mr. Caldwell, dinner is ready." "Rosa," he said, his voice catching slightly, "where do you and Lily eat when you're here late?" Rosa's expression shifted, surprise mixed with worry, as if she'd done something wrong. "In the kitchen, sir, at the small table by the window. I'm sorry if we've been too loud. No," Harrison interrupted. "I mean, could you set 3 places at that table?" The silence that followed felt enormous. Rosa stared at him as if he'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. "Sir, your daughter mentioned tres leches cake. I thought," he faltered, suddenly feeling foolish, "unless that would be inappropriate. I don't want to intrude on your—" "Mr. Caldwell," Rosa said softly, her eyes glistening. "In 5 years of working here, you've never—" "Yes, of course. It would be an honor." 20 minutes later, Harrison found himself sitting at a small wooden table in his own kitchen, a room he'd probably visited 3 times in the past decade, with a plate of chicken, mole, and rice that smelled nothing like the elaborate meals his private chef usually prepared. It smelled like someone's home, like someone's love. Lily sat across from him, her legs swinging under the chair, not quite reaching the floor. She'd looked up when he entered, her face breaking into a smile so genuine it physically hurt something inside his chest. "You came," she said. "Mama, he came." "Lily, mind your manners," Rosa cautioned, but there was warmth in her voice. "It's fine," Harrison said, surprising himself. "She's right. I came." The meal was awkward at first. Harrison had forgotten how to make small talk, how to eat without the weight of silence pressing down on every bite. But Lily filled the gaps with the effortless chatter of childhood, stories about her 3rd-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had a funny way of saying "actually," and about her best friend Jade, who could do a cartwheel but Lily couldn't yet, but she was practicing. Rosa watched her daughter with the kind of love Harrison recognized, the same way he used to watch Margot when she was young, before everything went wrong, before he'd forgotten that this was what mattered. "Your daughter is very perceptive," Harrison said to Rosa during a rare pause in Lily's monologue. Rosa's smile was complicated. "She sees things. Ever since her father," she glanced at Lily, choosing her words carefully. "Ever since we lost him, she notices when people are sad. She wants to fix it." "I'm sorry," Harrison said. "I didn't know you were widowed. 3 years now. Diabetes complications." He was only 34. Rosa's voice was steady, but Harrison heard the grief underneath, the kind that doesn't go away, just becomes part of who you are. Lily was 5. She still talks to him sometimes, tells him about her day. She says he listens better now than when he was alive. Rosa laughed softly. She might be right. Harrison felt something crack wider inside him. Here was this woman who'd lost her husband and was raising a daughter alone while cleaning houses to make ends meet, and she was still teaching that daughter to notice other people's pain, still teaching her that love meant showing up, asking hard questions, offering cake to sad millionaires. "Mr. Caldwell," Lily said suddenly, "do you have kids?" The question landed like a punch. Rosa's face went pale. "Lily, that's a very personal—" "I had a daughter," Harrison heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd kept locked. "Her name was Margot." "Had?" Lily asked with the directness only children possess. "She died 15 years ago." "That's why you eat alone," Lily said. It wasn't a question. "You miss her." Harrison's throat tightened. "Every day. My mama says people we love don't really leave us. She says they live in here." Lily placed her small hand over her heart. "Is your daughter in there?" Harrison couldn't speak. He could only nod. "Then you're not really eating alone," Lily said simply. "She's eating with you. You just can't see her." Something broke in Harrison Caldwell at that moment. Some dam he'd been holding for 15 years. His eyes burned. His hands trembled. And for the first time since he'd stood at Margot's grave and refused to cry because he didn't deserve the relief of tears, he felt something other than the familiar ache of self-punishment. He felt the possibility of forgiveness. Rosa stood quickly. "Lily, help me get the cake." As they moved toward the counter, Lily whispered loudly enough for Harrison to hear. "Mama, why is Mr. Caldwell crying?" "Because you gave him permission to, mija," Rosa whispered back. "Sometimes that's the greatest gift." The tres leches cake was sweet and perfect and tasted like hope might taste if hope could be baked into dessert. And as Harrison ate his second slice, something he never did, something the man who punished himself with lonely meals would never have allowed, he realized that Lily had been wrong about one thing. He hadn't been eating alone for 15 years. He'd been eating with ghosts, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to set a table for the living. The following weeks transformed Harrison's mansion in ways that had nothing to do with the expensive renovations he'd done over the years. It was something subtler, something money couldn't buy. The house was waking up. Friday dinners in the kitchen became a ritual. Rosa would cook dishes from her childhood in Oaxaca, chicken tinga, pozole verde, champorado, that Lily insisted tasted like chocolate giving you a hug. Harrison found himself looking forward to 6:30 with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years, found himself distracted during business calls, watching the clock. But it was more than just the meals. Lily had begun to treat the mansion like it was a mystery she'd been hired to solve. She'd wander through rooms during the hours Rosa worked, asking questions that no one else dared to ask. "Why is this room locked?" she'd say, standing outside Margot's door. "Why are all these pictures turned backward?" she'd ask, noticing the frames on the mantel that Harrison had turned to face the wall because he couldn't bear to see his daughter's smile. "Why don't you play the piano? Rosa says it's the most beautiful piano she's ever seen, but it just sits there like it's sleeping." That last question had struck something deep. The Steinway Grand in the music room had been Margot's. She'd played Chopin and Debussy, filled the house with melodies that made even Harrison's calculating heart soften. After she'd left, he couldn't bring himself to sell it, but he couldn't stand to hear it played either. So it had sat silent for 15 years, gathering dust and memories. One evening in late April, Harrison made a decision. He found Rosa in the library, polishing the built-in shelves that held books he'd collected, but never read. "Rosa, I need to ask you something, and please be honest with me." She turned, concern crossing her face. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell. Why did you bring Lily that first day?" The truth. Rosa's hands stilled on her dust cloth. She was quiet for a long moment. "I was going to lose my apartment," she finally said. "The rent went up and I was 3 weeks behind. My sister usually watches Lily after school, but she'd picked up an extra shift. I couldn't afford to miss work, not even one day. I was desperate. I'm sorry I didn't—" "Don't apologize," Harrison said. "I'm asking because I want to do something, and I need to know it won't offend you." "Sir, there's a cottage on the property, near the garden, past the oak trees. It's been empty for years. My estate manager used to live there before he retired. 3 bedrooms, full kitchen, completely furnished. I'd like you and Lily to live there, rent-free." Rosa's face went white. "Mr. Caldwell, I couldn't possibly—" "Please let me finish. I'm not offering this out of charity. I'm being selfish. These past weeks, having you and Lily here, eating dinner together, hearing laughter in these halls, it's reminded me what this house was supposed to be, what I lost, what I threw away." His voice cracked slightly. "You've given me something back that I thought was gone forever. Let me do this, not as your employer, as someone who's grateful." Tears streamed down Rosa's cheeks. "You don't understand what this means. Lily's school is 15 minutes from here. My sister lives in the next town over. We've been staying in a single room at the Riverside Motel for 2 months, ever since we lost the apartment. I've been telling Lily it's an adventure, but she knows. Children always know." "Then it's settled," Harrison said. "Move in this weekend. And Rosa, I'm giving you a raise, retroactive to the day you started. You should have been making twice what I've been paying you." That Saturday, Harrison did something he hadn't done in years. He got his hands dirty. He helped carry boxes, assembled Lily's bed frame, hung pictures on walls that weren't his. He watched Lily race from room to room in the cottage, her joy so pure and uncontained, it was like watching sunlight take human form. "Mr. Caldwell, come see my room. It has a window seat. I can read there and watch the birds and everything." As evening fell and the cottage glowed with warm light, Harrison stood in the garden watching Rosa and Lily through the kitchen window. They were making dinner together, dancing to music he couldn't hear, laughing about something he wasn't part of, and for the first time that was okay. He didn't need to be in the middle of their joy. It was enough to know he'd helped create space for it. "She would have liked them," a voice said behind him. Harrison turned. An older man stood there, perhaps 60, weathered face, kind eyes, wearing work clothes and boots. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "James Pritchard. I maintain the grounds here. Have for 20 years, though I doubt you've noticed. I mostly work early mornings." He gestured toward Rosa and Lily. "Your daughter, Margot, she would have liked them. She always wanted you to see people, not just their potential to disappoint you." Harrison bristled. "You knew Margot?" "She used to talk to me while I worked. Before everything went wrong, sweet girl. Had strong opinions about her father." James's voice was gentle but firm. "She used to say you couldn't see the garden for counting the trees, always calculating value, never just sitting with beauty. I don't recall asking for your opinion about about my relationship with my daughter. No, sir, you didn't, but I'm giving it anyway because somebody should. You're doing a good thing here, helping Rosa and her little girl. But if you're doing it to punish yourself less, you're missing the point. Margot didn't want you to suffer. She wanted you to change. James turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. That locked room you keep at the end of the East Wing, the one the little girl asks about. It's not a shrine, Mr. Caldwell. It's a tomb. And your daughter doesn't belong in a tomb. She belongs in your heart, in your memories, in the stories you tell about her. But to do that, you'd have to unlock the door. He walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving Harrison standing alone in a garden that suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a question he'd been avoiding. That night, Harrison stood outside Margot's door again. His hand touched the key he wore on a chain around his neck, the key he'd carried for 15 years but never used. Not tonight. He wasn't ready, but James's words echoed in his mind. It's not a shrine, it's a tomb. And somewhere in a cottage glowing with light and laughter, a little girl was falling asleep in a real bed for the first time in months, dreaming dreams that weren't haunted by motel parking lots and uncertain tomorrows. Harrison had changed one life tonight. Maybe changing his own wasn't impossible after all. Summer arrived in Savannah like a warm embrace that slowly turned into a suffocating grip. The air grew thick and sweet, heavy with humidity and the scent of gardenias. And with summer came something Harrison hadn't anticipated. Lily's endless curiosity turned into a full-scale investigation of his life. She'd found the old photo albums he'd boxed away in the study's bottom drawer. One afternoon in June, he walked in to find her sitting cross-legged on the Persian rug, surrounded by images of a life he'd tried to forget. "Is this your daughter?" Lily asked, holding up a photograph of Margot at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a trophy from her first piano recital. Harrison's instinct was to take the album away, to lock it back in the drawer where it belonged, but something stopped him. Instead, he lowered himself to the floor beside her, something his 73-year-old knees protested, but his heart demanded. "Yes, that's Margot. She looks happy. You're in this one too." Lily pointed to another photo. Harrison and Margot at the beach. She was maybe 9, building an elaborate sandcastle. His arm was around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something the camera had caught mid-moment. "That was Tybee Island," Harrison said, the memory washing over him with unexpected clarity. She'd just read a book about medieval castles and insisted we build one with a working moat. We spent 4 hours on it. The tide came in and destroyed it in minutes. She cried, but then she said, "That's okay, Daddy. Beautiful things don't have to last forever to matter." She was smart, Lily said. She was wise. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment, turning pages. Margot at 12, awkward and braces-faced. Margot at 16, stunning in her homecoming dress. Margot at 20, graduating from Savannah College of Art and Design, her smile bright, but her eyes already holding a distance that Harrison had been too busy to notice. "Where is she now?" Lily asked. Like her body, the question was so direct, so unflinchingly honest, that Harrison couldn't hide behind polite deflection. Bonaventure Cemetery, under an oak tree. She loved that place, used to go there to sketch. "Do you visit her?" Harrison's throat tightened. "No. Why not?" "Because I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of knowing she's really gone. Of having to say I'm sorry to a gravestone instead of to her face." Lily was quiet, studying him with those old soul eyes that seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed walls. "My mama says sorry doesn't always need words. Sometimes sorry is just showing up, even if you're late." That Sunday, for the first time in 15 years, Harrison drove to Bonaventure Cemetery. Rosa had offered to come with him, but he'd declined. Lily had asked if she could come too, and surprisingly, he'd said yes. They walked through the cemetery in the golden morning light, past elaborate monuments and simple markers, past tourists taking photographs of the famous sculptures and locals bringing flowers to people they still loved. Lily held his hand without being asked, her small fingers wrapped around his like an anchor. Margot's grave was simple. Harrison had chosen the most modest marker, believing at the time that he didn't deserve to memorialize her with anything grand. Just her name, her dates, and a line from her favorite poem, "Though lovers be lost, love shall not." Lily read it aloud. "What does that mean?" "It means even when people leave us, the love doesn't disappear. It stays." "Then why haven't you been here? If the love stays?" Harrison knelt beside the grave, his hand touching the warm granite. "Because I convinced myself I didn't deserve to feel it, that I'd killed it when I drove her away." "But you didn't kill it," Lily said. "It's right there in your heart, I can see it. It makes you sad, but it's there. It's big and bright and it hurts you, but that means it's real." Harrison's eyes burned. "I said terrible things to her. The last time I saw her, I told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life. I told her if she walked out that door, she wasn't my daughter anymore. And she looked at me and said, 'I've never been just your daughter, Dad. I've been your disappointment, your project, your investment. But I've never been allowed to just be Margot.' And she was right." The tears came then, 15 years of them, stored up behind a dam of pride and shame and stubborn refusal to forgive himself. They came in great, shaking sobs that he couldn't control, couldn't stop, couldn't hide. And Lily, this small, wise child who'd wandered into his life and asked impossible questions, simply put her arms around him and held on. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're not eating alone anymore, remember? She can hear you now. Tell her you're sorry." And Harrison did. He spoke to the gravestone, to the oak tree, to the warm summer air, to whatever existed beyond the veil between living and gone. He told Margot he was sorry, that she'd been right about everything, that he'd loved her but hadn't known how to love her well, that he'd missed 15 years of chances to fix it, but he was trying now, trying to be the kind of man who didn't eat alone in mansions built on money and emptiness, trying to be the kind of man who deserved to remember her with love instead of guilt. When the words finally ran out, Harrison felt lighter. Not healed. Healing would take longer than one morning in a cemetery, but lighter, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of his body. "Mr. Caldwell," Lily said as they walked back to the car, "I think your daughter is proud of you, for coming here, for saying sorry, for letting Rosa and me live in the cottage." I think she's smiling. "What makes you think that?" Lily pointed upward. A monarch butterfly had landed on Harrison's shoulder, its orange and black wings opening and closing slowly, like breathing. "Mama says butterflies are messages from people who love us. They come to tell us everything's going to be okay." Harrison stood very still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, watching this delicate creature rest on him like a benediction. It stayed for a long moment, impossible to say how long, and then lifted off, dancing through the cemetery's dappled sunlight before disappearing among the oak trees. "She forgives you," Lily said with the certainty only children possess. And Harrison, who'd spent 15 years convinced forgiveness was impossible, found himself believing her. That evening, he did something he hadn't done since Margot died. He went to the music room, sat down at the Steinway Grand and placed his hands on the keys. He couldn't play. He'd never learned. But he opened the bench and found Margot's old sheet music, her handwriting in the margins, notes to herself about tempo and feeling. Rosa found him there an hour later, holding Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, tears streaming down his face. "Would you like me to leave you alone?" she asked gently. "No," Harrison said. "I've been alone enough." Would you ask Lily if she'd like to learn to play? The piano, I could hire a teacher. It shouldn't just sit here silent." Rosa's smile was warm as summer sunshine. "She would love that, Mr. Caldwell." "Harrison," he said. "Please, call me Harrison." The butterfly had been a message, just as Lily said, but not just from Margot. It was a message from the man Harrison used to be to the man he was becoming, a reminder that transformation was possible, that it was never too late to choose love over guilt, connection over isolation, forgiveness over endless self-punishment. The house was waking up, and so finally was he. August brought a heat that made Savannah feel like it was melting, but it also brought an envelope that would change everything. Harrison was in his study going over quarterly reports when Rosa knocked on the door, her face pale and uncertain. "Harrison, this came for you. Certified mail. It looks official." The return address made his heart stop. Beckworth and Associates Legal Services, Portland, Oregon. His hands shook as he opened it. The letter was typed on crisp legal letterhead, formal and cold. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, I am writing on behalf of my client, Claire Beckworth, regarding Grace Elizabeth Beckworth, age 15. Ms. Beckworth has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and has been given 3 to 6 months to live. She is seeking to establish guardianship arrangements for Grace before her death. Given that you are Grace's biological grandfather and expressed interest in custody 15 years ago, Ms. Beckworth wishes to discuss the possibility of Grace coming to live with you after her passing. She requests a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss this arrangement and to allow you to meet Grace, who is unaware of your existence. Please contact our office to schedule a meeting. Sincerely, Mitchell Pearson, attorney at law. Harrison read the letter 3 times. Each word felt like it was written in a language he almost understood but couldn't quite grasp. Grace, his granddaughter, alive, real, 15 years old, about to lose the only mother she'd ever known, and Claire, the woman who'd taken her away, who'd built a life 3,000 miles from him, was dying and reaching out to the man she'd spent 15 years keeping at a distance. "Harrison?" Rosa's voice pulled him back. "What is it?" He couldn't speak. He simply handed her the letter and watched her face transform as she read. Shock, sympathy, concern, all flickering across her features. "Dios mío," she whispered. "Your granddaughter, after all these years. She doesn't know I exist." Harrison said, his voice hollow. Claire never told her about me, and now she's supposed to come live with a stranger, with the man who drove her mother away. He stood abruptly, pacing the study like a caged animal. This is impossible. I can't do this. I'm barely learning how to be human again, Rosa. How am I supposed to be a grandfather to a 15-year-old girl who has every reason to hate me? You call them back, Rosa said firmly. You meet with Claire, you meet Grace, and you do what Margot would have wanted you to do. And what's that? You show up, even if you're late. 3 days later, Harrison found himself on a plane to Portland, his first flight in years. He'd stopped traveling after Margot died, conducting all his business through video calls and letting his partners handle anything that required a physical presence. But this couldn't be done remotely. This required him to step into the life he'd been excluded from for 15 years. Claire Beckworth lived in a modest craftsman house in the Selwood neighborhood, with a small garden and a porch swing that looked well used. Harrison stood on her doorstep, his heart hammering, feeling more terrified than he'd felt closing his first $1 million deal. The woman who answered the door was a ghost. Cancer had ravaged her. She was thin, pale, wearing a scarf that covered her hair loss, but her eyes were the same fierce brown he remembered from the custody hearing. Those eyes that had looked at him 15 years ago with such righteous anger, such protective fury. Mr. Caldwell, she said. No warmth, but no hostility either. Just exhaustion. Thank you for coming. Ms. Beckworth, I'm so sorry about your diagnosis. Claire, please, we're past formalities now. She stepped aside. Grace is at school. I wanted to talk to you first, alone. They sat in her small living room, surrounded by evidence of a life well lived. Photos of Grace at various ages, artwork on the walls, books everywhere, a guitar leaning against the couch. It looked nothing like Harrison's mansion. It looked like a home. I'll be direct, Claire said. I'm dying. I have maybe 4 months if I'm lucky. Grace has no other family. Thomas was an only child after I was born. Our parents died years ago. So I've looked at other options. Foster care, my friend Andrea offered, but she has 4 kids of her own in limited space, and then I thought about you. Why now? Harrison asked, trying to keep the bitterness from his voice. You spent 15 years making sure I couldn't see her. Because Margot asked me to, Claire said simply. In the hospital. Before she died, she made me promise. She said, don't let my father turn Grace into what he tried to turn me into. Don't let him teach her that love is conditional on performance, that worth is measured in achievements, that money matters more than people. She was terrified you'd raise Grace the way you raised her. The words hit like physical blows. And now I'm dying. And I've spent 15 years watching Grace grow into the most remarkable young woman. She's brilliant, compassionate, creative, everything Thomas and Margot would have wanted. But she's also lost. She knows I'm dying and she's terrified. She needs family, Mr. Caldwell, real family. And whether I like it or not, you're all she has. What changed your mind about me? Claire pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and turned it toward him. It was a private investigator's report. Photos of Harrison, recent ones, eating dinner in his kitchen with Rosa and Lily, kneeling at Margot's grave, sitting at the piano with Lily beside him, teaching her to ride the bicycle he'd bought her. I hired someone to check on you 3 months ago when I first got my diagnosis, Claire explained. I needed to know if you'd changed, if you were still the man who'd driven Margot away. And what I found surprised me. You're learning to be human again, Mr. Caldwell. You're learning what Margot tried to teach you. That love isn't about control, it's about showing up. Harrison's eyes burned. I don't know if I can do this. I failed Margot. What if I fail Grace? You will fail her, Claire said bluntly. Probably multiple times. That's what parenting is, failing and trying again. But the question is, will you try? Will you show up even when it's hard? Will you love her even when she pushes you away? Because she will push you away. She's 15, grieving, and about to meet the grandfather she's never known. She's going to test you. When can I meet her? Tomorrow. She comes home from school at 3:30. I've told her that someone wants to meet her, someone important, but I haven't told her who. I thought maybe you should tell her yourself. About Margot, about everything. Harrison nodded, unable to trust his voice. Claire leaned forward, and despite her fragility, her voice was steel. One more thing, Mr. Caldwell. If you're doing this out of guilt, if you're trying to fix your mistakes with Margot by fixing Grace, don't. She's not a do-over. She's not your second chance at redemption. She's a 15-year-old girl who's about to lose her mother and needs someone to love her for who she is, not who she represents. Can you do that? Harrison thought about Lily asking him why he ate alone, about Rosa teaching her daughter to see people's sadness and try to fix it, about the butterfly at Margot's grave, about the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. I don't know, he said honestly, but I want to try. I want to be the grandfather Margot would have wanted for her daughter, even if I'm 15 years late. Claire's eyes softened slightly. Then come back tomorrow at 3:30. And Harrison, don't bring gifts. Don't bring money, just bring yourself. That's all Grace needs to see, whether the person under all that wealth is someone worth knowing. That night, in his Portland hotel room, Harrison called Rosa. He told her everything, about Claire dying, about Grace, about the meeting tomorrow that terrified him more than anything had in years. "You can do this," Rosa said. "You're not the same man you were 15 years ago. You're not even the same man you were 6 months ago. What if she hates me? Then you love her anyway. That's what family does." Harrison hung up and stared at his reflection in the hotel mirror. Tomorrow, he would meet his granddaughter. Tomorrow, he would face the consequence of every choice he'd made, every bridge he'd burned, every year he'd wasted eating alone in a mansion full of ghosts. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Harrison arrived at Claire's house at exactly 3:30, his palms sweating despite the cool Portland afternoon. He'd changed his shirt 3 times at the hotel, finally settling on something casual, a button-down and khakis. No tie. He wanted to look approachable, not like the corporate titan who'd valued contracts over connection. Claire opened the door, and he could see the exhaustion weighing on her. "She's in her room. She knows someone's here to meet her. I told her it was important, but I didn't say who. I thought—" Claire paused, steadying herself against the doorframe. "I thought you should be the one to tell her about Margot, about everything. Are you sure that's wise?" "No, but it's honest. And Grace deserves honesty." Claire led him to a closed door at the end of the hallway. Behind it, Harrison could hear music, something alternative and melancholic that he didn't recognize. Claire knocked softly. "Grace, there's someone here who needs to talk to you." The music stopped. Footsteps. Then the door opened and Harrison's heart stopped with it. The girl standing before him was Margot. Not literally. Grace had darker hair, Thomas's height, a different shape to her face, but the eyes were Margot's. The way she held herself, that mixture of curiosity and defensiveness, the slight tilt of her head when she was assessing someone. It was like watching his daughter at 15, like time had folded back on itself. "Grace," Claire said gently, "this is Harrison Caldwell, your grandfather." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace stared at him, her expression cycling through confusion, shock, and then something darker, understanding mixed with betrayal. "My what?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "Your mother's father," Claire said. "I know this is a shock, sweetheart, but you told me I didn't have any other family." Grace's eyes never left Harrison's face, and the accusation in them was a knife. "You said it was just us. You said—" Her voice cracked. "Why is he here? Why now?" Claire's hand touched Grace's shoulder, but the girl shrugged it off. "Grace, please, let's sit down and—" "No." Grace stepped back into her room like she was retreating to safety. "I don't want to sit down. I want to know why there's suddenly a grandfather I've never heard of standing in our house when you're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Harrison found his voice. "Grace, I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me or want to know me. But I'd like to explain—" Explain what? Where you've been for 15 years, why you didn't care enough to—" Grace stopped, her eyes widening as pieces clicked together. "Wait, Aunt Claire moved us all the way to Portland when I was a baby. We moved across the country. Was that because of you?" The intelligence in her eyes, the way she connected dots, most people would miss. That was Margot too. Harrison had forgotten how sharp his daughter had been, how she'd always seen through his carefully constructed explanations to the uncomfortable truth underneath. "Yes," Harrison said, because Claire was right. Grace deserved honesty. "Your aunt moved to keep you away from me, because I was a terrible father to your mother, because when she wanted to marry your father, I gave her an ultimatum, leave him or lose me. She chose your father, and I let her go." Grace's face transformed, pain and fury mixing into something that looked like hate. "You drove her away? My mom died hating you?" "Grace!" Claire tried to intervene, but Harrison held up his hand. "It's okay. She needs to know." He looked at Grace directly, refusing to hide from her anger. "Yes, your mother died estranged from me, because I was too proud, too stubborn, too convinced I knew better than everyone else. I thought I was protecting her from someone who wanted her money. I was wrong about your father. I was wrong about everything." "Then why are you here?" Grace's voice broke. "Did you suddenly remember you have a granddaughter? Is this some guilt thing? Because Aunt Claire is dying and you figured you should probably—" "Grace!" Claire's voice was sharp. "That's enough." "No, it's not enough." Grace was crying now, angry tears that reminded Harrison so much of Margot on that last night, standing in his foyer telling him she never wanted to see him again. "She's dying. Aunt Claire is all I have, and she's dying, and now you show up. Some stranger who's supposed to be family but who didn't care enough to find me for 15 years. You think you can just walk in here and what? Take over? Be my guardian? Save me? I don't think I can save you," Harrison said quietly. "I couldn't save your mother. I couldn't save myself for a very long time. But Claire asked me to come because you need family, and whether you like it or not, I'm it. And yes, I'm 15 years late. I'm a stranger. I'm the man who drove your mother away, but I'm also trying to be different than I was. I'm trying to be the kind of man your mother wanted me to be, the kind of man who deserves to know you. I don't want to know you. Grace's voice was cold now, the tears gone, replaced by a wall of ice that reminded Harrison painfully of himself. I don't need you. I'm fine. You're not fine, Claire said softly. Sweetheart, you're not fine. And that's okay, but you can't do this alone. I can go into foster care, Andrea said. Andrea has 4 kids in a 3-bedroom house and barely makes ends meet, Claire said. Grace, please, just talk to him. Give him a chance. Why? Why should I give him anything when he gave my mom nothing? Harrison felt the question like a punch, but he didn't deflect it. You shouldn't. I don't deserve a chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Not because I've earned it, because you deserve to have someone who's trying to learn how to love people better, someone who's made terrible mistakes, but who wants to do better. Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to Claire. Can we talk? Alone? Claire nodded. Harrison left the room, standing in the hallway listening to the murmur of voices. Grace's anger, Claire's soothing responses, back and forth like waves. After 20 minutes, Claire emerged, looking exhausted. She wants you to leave. She's not ready. Harrison's heart sank, but he nodded. I understand. But, Claire continued, she agreed to one thing. She'll have dinner with you. Tomorrow night. One dinner at a restaurant of her choosing. She gets to ask you questions, and you have to answer them honestly. No corporate deflection, no polished PR responses, real answers. Can you do that? Yes. Harrison, Claire said, her voice heavy with warning. She's going to ask you things that will hurt. She's going to try to make you prove you're different from the man who failed Margot. She's testing whether you're worth the risk. Don't fail this test. That night, Harrison barely slept. He kept seeing Grace's face, so much like Margot's, full of the same fierce independence, the same refusal to accept easy answers. She was her mother's daughter in all the ways that mattered. The next evening, he met Grace at a small Italian restaurant in her neighborhood. She'd chosen it deliberately, he suspected, somewhere modest, unpretentious, not the kind of place where his money would give him an advantage. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in a back booth, wearing jeans and a hoodie, her dark hair pulled back. She looked younger than 15 and older than the world at the same time. You came, she said as he sat down. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought maybe you'd realize this was too hard and bail. That's what Claire said you did with my mom. When things got difficult, you chose being right over being there. Harrison absorbed the blow. Fair assessment, but I'm here now. For how long? Until I'm too difficult? Until I don't live up to whatever expectations you have? Grace's eyes challenged him. Claire showed me the articles about you. Harrison Caldwell, real estate magnate, worth over $200 million. You live in some massive mansion in Savannah. You've built an empire. What could you possibly want with a 15-year-old who listens to sad music and gets B's in algebra? I want to know you, Harrison said simply. Not who I think you should be, just who you are. Why should I believe that? Because I've spent the last 15 years eating alone in a mansion full of everything money can buy and nothing that matters. Because an 8-year-old girl asked me why I ate like I was being punished, and I realized she was right. Because I went to your mother's grave for the first time in 15 years and told her I was sorry. Because I'm trying to become someone worthy of the second chance I don't deserve. He leaned forward. Grace, I can't change the past. I can't bring your mother back or give you the grandfather who should have been there from the beginning, but I can offer you something. What? A home, a family, someone who shows up, even when it's hard. Grace was quiet for a long moment, studying him. Then she said, okay, I have questions. And Claire said you have to answer honestly. Ask me anything. Did my mom hate you when she died? The question was a dagger, but Harrison didn't flinch. I don't know, I hope not, but I wouldn't blame her if she did. Do you have other family, a wife, other kids? No, your grandmother died when Margot was 12. I never remarried. Margot was my only child. You're my only grandchild, so I'm all you have left. Yes, Grace's eyes glistened. That's not fair. I don't want to be responsible for your redemption story. I don't want to be the thing that fixes you. You're not, Harrison said. I'm trying to fix myself. You're the reason it matters. You're the reason I want to be better. The dinner lasted 2 hours. Grace asked question after question about Margot's childhood, about the fight that drove her away, about why he'd never tried harder to find them, about what his life had been like for 15 years. Harrison answered everyone, refusing to hide behind comfortable lies. By the end, Grace wasn't smiling, but some of the ice had thawed. I'm not ready to call you Grandpa, she said. I'm not ready to pretend we're family, just because Claire needs me to have somewhere to go when her voice broke. I'm not asking you to pretend, Harrison said. I'm just asking you not to close the door completely. Give me a chance to prove I'm not the man who failed your mother, that's all. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, one condition. If I come to Savannah, if I live with you, I want to know everything about my mom, not the version you think I should hear. Everything. The good, the bad, the fights, the love. all of it. Deal? Harrison extended his hand across the table. Deal. Grace shook it, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that wasn't anger or fear. He saw possibility. Claire died 6 weeks later, on a quiet October morning with Grace holding her hand and Harrison standing silently in the corner of the hospice room. She'd fought until the end, determined to see Grace settled, to know her niece would be okay. In those final weeks, Harrison had flown to Portland 3 times, sitting with Claire while Grace was at school, listening to stories about the girl he was about to become responsible for. She's stubborn, Claire had told him during one of those visits, her voice weak but determined. She inherited that from both sides. She'll push you away when she needs you most. Don't let her, and don't try to buy her affection. She sees through that immediately. What does she need? Harrison had asked. The same thing Margot needed. Permission to be imperfect, space to figure out who she is without someone telling her who she should be, and someone who stays, even when it's hard. At Claire's funeral, Harrison watched Grace deliver a eulogy that broke his heart, composed, articulate, devastating in its honesty. She spoke about Claire as a mother, not an aunt, about the sacrifices Claire had made, the life she'd built for them, the love that had been steady and unconditional even as her body betrayed her. Aunt Claire taught me that family isn't about blood, Grace said, her voice only shaking once. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when you're difficult. Her eyes found Harrison in the small crowd. She also taught me that people can change, that it's never too late to try to be better. I'm going to try to remember that. After the funeral, Grace packed her life into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases. 15 years condensed into containers that fit in the back of a car. Harrison helped her carry them, noting what she chose to bring. Books, sketch pads, Claire's guitar, photos, a worn, stuffed elephant she tried to hide, but he pretended not to see. The flight back to Savannah was quiet. Grace sat by the window, watching Portland disappear beneath the clouds, and Harrison didn't try to fill the silence with empty reassurances. Sometimes grief needed space more than words. When they arrived at the mansion, Rosa and Lily were waiting on the front steps. Harrison had warned them not to overwhelm Grace, but Lily's natural exuberance was hard to contain. "You must be Grace," Lily said, practically bouncing. "I'm Lily. I'm 9. Well, almost 9. In 2 months, Mr. Harrison, helped me and my mama, and now we live in the cottage and I've been learning piano on your mum's piano. But if you want me to stop, I totally can because it was her piano first and—" "Lily," Rosa said gently, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Breathe." Grace's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her armor since Claire's death. "It's okay. I don't play. My mom did, but I never learned. I'm glad someone's using it." Rosa stepped forward. "Grace, I'm Rosa. I'm so sorry for your loss. We've prepared a room for you upstairs. If you need anything at all, please ask. And if you need space, we understand that too. Thank you," Grace said quietly. Harrison showed her to her room, not Margot's room, which still remained locked, but a guest suite he'd had Rosa prepare. Neutral colors, comfortable furniture, a desk by the window overlooking the garden. Not too personal, not too sterile, a blank canvas. "This is temporary," Harrison said, "until you decide how you want it. If you want to paint the walls or change the furniture or anything else, just tell me." Grace set down her backpack and looked around. "It's nice. Big. Too big. Everything here is too big." She wasn't being cruel, just honest. "Claire's whole house could fit in this one room." "I know. It's excessive. Lonely, actually, when it's just one person." Harrison hesitated. "But maybe less lonely with 3 people. And a very enthusiastic 9-year-old. Grace almost smiled. Almost. Over the next few weeks, they developed a careful rhythm. Grace enrolled at Savannah Country Day School, starting mid-semester in sophomore year. Awkward timing, but she handled it with the same quiet determination she seemed to apply to everything. Harrison drove her to school each morning, and they'd sit in the car for a few minutes before she got out, not quite talking but not quite silent either. Rosa cooked meals that Grace picked at, grief stealing her appetite. Lily talked enough for everyone, filling the spaces Grace couldn't yet fill with stories about school and piano lessons and the family of cardinals nesting in the oak tree. But Harrison could see Grace struggling. She'd lock herself in her room for hours, music playing loud enough to signal stay away. She'd sit at dinner with hollow eyes, present but absent. She'd flinch when Harrison tried to help with homework, as if expecting criticism instead of support. One evening in November, Harrison knocked on her door. No answer. He knocked again. "What?" Grace's voice was sharp. "Can I come in?" A pause. Fine. She was sitting on her bed, surrounded by textbooks, her laptop open to what looked like a college application website. She was only 15, but she was already planning her escape. "How's homework?" Harrison asked. "Fine. Grace, you don't have to pretend with me. If you're struggling, I'm not struggling. I'm fine. Everyone keeps asking if I'm fine, and I keep saying I'm fine, and no one believes me. But what else am I supposed to say?" Her voice rose. "That I miss Claire so much I can't breathe sometimes? That I feel guilty for being alive when she's dead? That I'm living in a stranger's house trying to figure out how to be grateful when all I want is to go back to our tiny house in Portland where things made sense?" "Yes," Harrison said quietly. "Say that. Say all of it." Grace stared at him. "What? You asked what you're supposed to say. Say that, the truth, the hard, ugly, complicated truth. Don't perform being fine for me. I've spent enough years performing for the world. It's exhausting, and it doesn't help." Something in Grace's face crumbled. "I don't know how to do this, how to be here, how to be your granddaughter when I don't even know you. Claire said you were trying to change, that you were different from who you used to be, but what if you're not? What if I let myself trust you and you turn out to be exactly what my mom ran away from?" Harrison sat down in the chair by her desk, giving her space. "Then you'll have learned something important about who not to trust. But Grace, I need you to know something. I'm going to fail you, probably multiple times. I'm going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, push when I should pull. I'm 73 years old and I'm still learning how to be a decent human being, but I'm trying, and I'm not going anywhere. Everyone goes somewhere eventually." Grace said, her voice small. "My dad died before I was born. My mom died when I was a baby. Claire just died. Everyone leaves. You're right, everyone does eventually, but not by choice. Not because you're too difficult or not good enough, or any of the lies your brain is probably telling you right now. Claire left because cancer is cruel and unfair. Your parents left because of an accident, not because of you. Never because of you." Grace was crying now, the kind of crying she'd probably been holding in since Claire died, since before that, since she'd learned that the most important people in your life could disappear without warning. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being strong and fine and okay when I'm none of those things." "Then don't be," Harrison said. "Be tired, be angry, be sad, be whatever you are. This house is big enough for all of it." They sat in silence for a while, Grace crying, and Harrison simply being present, not trying to fix it, not trying to make it better, just staying. It was something he'd learned from Lily, from Rosa, from the hard months of learning to be human again. Sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply not leave. Finally, Grace wiped her eyes. "Can I ask you something? Anything? My mom's room, the one you keep locked. Why won't you open it?" Harrison's chest tightened. "Because I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of admitting she's really gone. Of facing all the ways I failed her. Of," he paused, searching for honesty, "of not knowing how to remember her. Whether I have the right to keep her room like a shrine when I was the one who drove her away." Grace was quiet for a moment. I think she'd want you to open it. I think she'd want me to see it, to know who she was before everything went wrong. You're probably right. Will you? Open it? Show me?" Harrison looked at this girl, his granddaughter, his second chance, his opportunity to do for her what he'd failed to do for Margot, and he realized that Claire had been right. Grace wasn't his redemption. She was simply a person who deserved to know her history, to understand where she came from, to see that people could fail and still be worth knowing. "Yes," he said, "tomorrow. We'll open it together." That night, Harrison stood outside Margot's door again, his hand on the key around his neck. Tomorrow he would turn it. Tomorrow he would let Grace see who her mother had been. Tomorrow he would stop treating his daughter's memory like a wound he deserved to keep infected and start treating it like what it was, a gift he'd been given and lost and had one more chance to honor properly. Tomorrow he would finally unlock the door. In her room, Grace lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something she hadn't felt since Claire died. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. And in the cottage, Lily told Rosa about the day, about Grace crying, about Harrison staying. "Do you think they'll be okay?" Lily asked. Rosa kissed her daughter's forehead. "I think they're going to try. And sometimes, Mija, trying is enough." The next morning, Harrison woke before dawn. He'd barely slept, his mind circling the moment that was coming. Opening Margot's door, letting Grace see the room that had remained frozen for 15 years, admitting that his daughter had existed as more than his failure. He found Grace already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Rosa, drinking coffee that she was probably too young for, but that Rosa had made anyway, understanding that sometimes teenagers needed to feel grown up, especially when facing grown-up pain. "Morning," Grace said, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. She'd made a decision during the night and Harrison could see it in the set of her shoulders. She was ready. "Morning. Still want to do this?" "Yes." They walked through the mansion in silence, their footsteps echoing on hardwood floors, past rooms filled with expensive furniture and empty memories. When they reached the door at the end of the east wing, Harrison's hand trembled as he pulled the key from around his neck. "I haven't opened this door since the day after her funeral," he said. "I came in once, looked around and locked it. I told myself I was preserving her memory. Really, I was just avoiding it." "It's okay to be scared," Grace said quietly. Harrison looked at her, this 15-year-old who'd buried everyone she'd ever loved, who had every reason to be bitter and closed off, but who was instead standing here offering him permission to be afraid. She was more like Margot than she knew. He turned the key. The door opened on a room trapped in time, Margot's bedroom, exactly as she'd left it at 23 years old. Posters on the walls, vintage concert advertisements, art prints from museums she'd visited, a map of Paris where she'd dreamed of going. Her desk was still covered with sketchbooks, pencils organized in old coffee cans, a half-finished drawing of the mansion's garden. Her bookshelf overflowed with novels, art history texts, journals filled with her handwriting. The bed was unmade. She'd left in a hurry that night, angry and hurt and done with trying to make her father see her. Her closet door hung open, revealing clothes from another era, styles that had come and gone while this room stayed frozen. Grace walked in slowly, like entering a museum dedicated to a person she'd never met but was supposed to know. She touched the books, ran her fingers over the sketches, studied the face in the photographs scattered across the dresser. "She looks like me," Grace whispered, picking up a photo of Margot at 16. "You have her eyes, her stubbornness, her ability to see through people's nonsense." Grace moved to the desk, carefully opening a sketchbook. The pages were filled with detailed drawings, buildings, people, landscapes, abstract designs that suggested emotion more than form. On one page, a portrait of a man who could only be Harrison, younger, rendered in sharp angles and dark lines. Beneath it, in Margot's handwriting, "My father, brilliant at building empires, terrible at building relationships." Grace showed it to Harrison. "She was angry with you. She had every right to be. But she still drew you. She still kept your picture. She was still trying to understand you." Grace turned more pages, more drawings, and then, near the end of the sketchbook, something different, a series of sketches of a young man, Thomas, rendered with softer lines, more light, captured in moments of laughter, concentration, tenderness. Beneath one drawing, "The man my father thinks is using me, the man who actually sees me." "This is my dad," Grace said, her voice breaking. "I've only seen photographs, but this, she loved him. You can see it in how she drew him." "She did love him," Harrison said, "and I couldn't see it. I could only see what I assumed he wanted. The money, the security, the easy life. I never considered that maybe he just wanted her, that maybe being loved for who you are instead of what you can provide was enough." Grace found a journal, opened it carefully. The entries were dated, starting from when Margot was 19, continuing through her early 20s. Grace read silently for a few minutes, then looked up, tears streaming down her face. "She writes about you. She says she wishes you'd just see her, not as an investment or a project or a disappointment. Just as herself, she says she knows you love her, but that your love feels like a business contract, conditional on performance, subject to terms and conditions." Grace's voice shook. "She says she's leaving, but she hopes one day you'll understand why." Harrison's legs felt weak. He sat on Margot's bed, the first time he'd sat there since she was a child, since he'd read her bedtime stories and thought he knew how to be a father. "I never understood. Not until it was too late." Grace kept reading, turning pages, moving through time. Then she stopped, her face going pale. "Harrison, there's an entry here, from the hospital, after the accident." "What?" "She wrote it after Thomas died. Before—" Grace's hands trembled. "Before she died. Do you want me to read it?" Harrison couldn't speak. He could only nod. Grace's voice was barely a whisper as she read, "Thomas is gone. I can't breathe without him. I can't imagine a world without him. But our daughter is alive. Grace, we named her Grace because she's a Grace I don't deserve. She's fighting so hard and I'm so scared, but I have to believe she'll make it. I have to believe she'll grow up knowing she was loved. I wish my father could meet her. I wish I wasn't so angry with him that I can't ask him to be here. I wish he'd learned that love isn't about control, that sometimes the people we love make choices we disagree with, and we love them anyway. I hope Grace never has to choose between love and approval. I I hope she knows they're supposed to be the same thing. Tell her about her father. Tell her about me. Tell her we loved her more than anything. And if my father ever asks about her, tell him I hope he learned something. Tell him it's not too late to change." The entry ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. Harrison's face was wet with tears. He didn't remember starting to cry. "She hoped I'd learned something. She said it wasn't too late. She forgave you," Grace said. "Maybe not completely, maybe not enough to ask you to be there, but she forgave you enough to hope you'd change, to leave the door open, even a crack." Grace set the journal down and walked to where Harrison sat on the bed. She stood in front of him, this girl who was his last connection to his daughter, his last chance to get it right. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you love me because I'm Grace, or because I'm what's left of Margot?" The question was a knife, but it was a fair one. Harrison looked up at her, forcing himself to be completely honest. "When Claire first contacted me, I thought it was about Margot, a chance to fix what I'd broken. But then I met you, and Grace, you're not what's left of Margot. You're not a second chance for me to get fatherhood right. You're your own person, stubborn, brilliant, guarded, brave. You're someone I'm getting to know, and I'm realizing I want to know you not because of who you came from, but because of who you are. How do I know you mean that?" "You don't. Not yet. I have to prove it every day. By seeing you, not the ghost of your mother. By loving you for who you are, not who I think you should be. By staying, even when it's hard." Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to redecorate this room." "What?" "My mom's room. I want to turn it into something new. Keep some of her things, the sketches, the journals, the stuff that shows who she was, but make it mine, too. A space where she's remembered, but where I also get to exist. Is that okay?" Harrison felt something release in his chest, something that had been clenched tight for 15 years. "Yes, that's more than okay. That's perfect. And I want to frame some of her drawings, put them around the house. She was talented. People should see her work, not just keep it locked away like it's too precious or too painful to look at. We'll do that, together." Grace picked up the sketchbook again, studying her mother's drawing of Thomas. "Can we visit their graves? My parents? I've never been. Claire thought it would be too hard, but I think I need to see where they are. I need to tell them I'm okay, or trying to be. Of course, whenever you're ready." "Tomorrow," Grace said firmly, "before I lose my nerve." They spent the rest of the day in Margot's room, not packing it away, but beginning the work of transforming it from a shrine into a living space. Grace chose what to keep. The sketchbooks would stay, arranged on new shelves. The journals would be preserved, read, honored. The furniture would be replaced, the walls repainted, but Margot's art would cover them, a reminder that she'd existed, created, loved. Rosa brought them lunch on a tray, took one look at the open door and Grace sorting through books and simply smiled. "It's about time," she said. Lily peeked in, her eyes wide. "Is this your mum's room?" "It was," Grace said. "Now it's becoming mine too." "That's good," Lily said with the wisdom of 9-year-olds who see things clearly. "Rooms shouldn't be empty. They should have people in them." That evening, Grace asked Harrison to teach her about the family business, not because she wanted to take it over. She wasn't interested in real estate empires, but because she wanted to understand what had consumed so much of his life that he'd lost sight of what mattered. "I need to know what was more important than my mum," she said, "not to judge you, to understand you." So Harrison took her to his study, showed her the contracts and deals and properties that had built his fortune. And as he explained it, he heard himself clearly for the first time how small it all sounded, how hollow, how utterly worthless it had been compared to what he'd lost. "It wasn't worth it," he said finally. "None of it was worth losing her." "No," Grace agreed, "but you know that now. That counts for something." Later that night, as Grace was heading to bed, she paused in the doorway of the room that was slowly becoming hers. "Harrison?" "Yes, thank you for opening the door, for letting me see her, for not pretending she was perfect or that what happened wasn't complicated. Thank you for giving me a chance to try. I know I don't deserve it." Grace's smile was small, but real. "Maybe none of us deserve the chances we get. Maybe we just have to decide whether we're brave enough to take them." She disappeared into her room, leaving Harrison standing in the hallway, feeling something he hadn't felt in 15 years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was becoming the kind of man Margot had hoped he'd be. The kind who understood that love wasn't about control or conditions. It was about showing up, staying, trying, failing, trying again. It was about opening locked doors and letting the light in, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. 6 months later, on a bright April morning, Harrison stood in the kitchen watching Grace teach Lily a chord progression on Margot's piano. The music room, once silent as a tomb, now filled with laughter and mistakes and the beautiful chaos of learning. Grace's fingers moved over the keys with increasing confidence, and and when she hit a wrong note, she didn't flinch or apologize. She just tried again. The transformation hadn't been smooth or easy. There had been fights, explosive arguments where Grace screamed that he didn't understand her, that he was trying to control her just like he'd controlled Margot, that she wanted to go back to Portland even though there was nothing to go back to. There had been nights when she'd locked herself in her room and refused dinner, days when the weight of grief made it impossible for her to get out of bed, moments when Harrison had no idea what to do except stay close and wait for the storm to pass. But they'd made it through together, with Rosa's steady wisdom and Lily's boundless optimism, and the therapist Harrison had found who specialized in teenage grief and family reconciliation, with honest conversations that hurt like surgery but healed like medicine, with Grace's willingness to try and Harrison's determination not to repeat his mistakes. The room that had been Margot's was now undeniably Grace's, walls painted a deep teal that she'd chosen, her own posters and photographs mixed with her mother's sketches, her books and art supplies scattered across the desk where Margot had once drawn. It was a space that honored the past while making room for the present, a space where both women could exist. Harrison had framed Margot's best drawings and hung them throughout the mansion. Visitors now saw her work first, her talent, her vision, her humanity. The house that had been a mausoleum was becoming a home, not the same home it had been when Margot was alive, but something new, something built on honesty and second chances, and the understanding that families could be broken and repaired and broken again and still be worth fighting for. "Harrison!" Lily called from the music room. "Come listen." Grace learned the whole song. He walked in to find both girls at the piano bench, Grace's hands poised over the keys. She looked up at him and he saw it. The subtle shift that had happened over these months. The guardedness in her eyes had softened, not disappeared. She'd been hurt too many times to ever be completely unguarded, but softened enough to let him in. "It's not perfect," Grace warned. "Nothing worth doing is perfect," Harrison said, repeating words Rosa had told him months ago. Grace played, a simple melody, but played with feeling. When she finished, Lily applauded enthusiastically, and Harrison found his eyes burning with the tears that came easier now, tears he no longer tried to hide. "Your mother would be proud," he said. "You think so? I know so. You're exactly who she hoped you'd be. Strong and creative and yourself, not who anyone else thinks you should be." Grace's smile was complicated, sad and hopeful at once. "I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. That's all any of us can do. Try. Show up. Keep going." Later that afternoon, they drove to Bonaventure Cemetery, a journey they'd made together several times now. Grace had wanted to visit her parents' graves, to speak to people she'd never known, but who'd loved her enough to give her life. Harrison had arranged for Thomas to be buried beside Margot, had commissioned a shared headstone that read, "Thomas and Margot Beckworth, forever together, forever loved, forever Grace's parents." Grace knelt between the graves, placing fresh flowers on each. Harrison stood back, giving her privacy, but she motioned for him to come closer. "I want you here," she said. "You're part of this story too." Harrison knelt beside her, his old knees protesting but his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," Grace said softly. "It's been 6 months since I moved here. 6 months since Aunt Claire died. I know you're together somewhere. All 3 of you probably worried about me." She laughed slightly. "But I'm okay, or getting there." "Harrison, Grandpa, he's trying really hard. He messes up sometimes. He still doesn't understand why I like the music I like or why I want to study art instead of business, but he listens. He stays. He doesn't give up on me even when I'm difficult." Harrison felt his throat tighten. "I found your drawings, Mom. You were so talented. I'm going to study art like you did. Maybe I'll be half as good someday. And Dad, Aunt Claire told me so many stories about you. How you could fix anything. How you made Mom laugh. How you loved her even though it cost you everything. I wish I'd known you both. But I'm learning about you through the people who loved you. And I'm learning that love doesn't end just because people do." Grace placed her hand on Margot's headstone. "Mom, I know you and Harrison didn't part well. I know you died angry and hurt. But I think you'd want to know. He's different now. He's learning what you tried to teach him. That people matter more than success. That love isn't about control. That sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them be themselves." She turned to Harrison. "Do you want to say anything?" Harrison placed his hand next to Grace's on the stone. His voice was rough with emotion. "Margot, I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing you. For trying to control you instead of supporting you. For letting pride and fear keep me from being the father you deserved. You were right about everything. About Thomas, about love, about what matters. And you left me the greatest gift, Grace. I promise I'm trying to do better. To be the grandfather you would have wanted for her. To honor your memory by loving her the way I should have loved you. Without conditions. Without trying to make her into what I think she should be, just loving her for who she is." They sat in silence for a while, the spring sun warm on their shoulders, butterflies dancing among the flowers. A monarch landed on Grace's hand, just for a moment, before flying away toward the oak trees. "She's here," Grace whispered. "They both are. Can you feel it?" "Yes," Harrison said. And he could. Not in any mystical sense, but in the way Margot lived in Grace's stubbornness and creativity. In the way love persisted even after death, even after mistakes, even after years of separation and regret. In the understanding that families were complicated and messy and worth fighting for anyway. As they drove home, Grace said, "I got into the summer art program at SCAD, the one I applied to." "That's wonderful. I didn't know you'd applied. I wasn't sure I'd get in, and I wasn't sure I wanted to tell you in case you thought it was a waste of time." "Grace, I would never—" "I know," she interrupted. "Now I know, but old fears die hard, you know. Claire used to say that healing isn't linear. Some days you trust people, and some days you remember why you learned not to. That's fair. And for what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud of you. For applying, for getting in, for pursuing what you love, instead of what you think you should do." Grace smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "Thanks, Grandpa." It was the first time she'd called him that. Harrison's foot nearly slipped off the gas pedal. "What did you say?" "Don't make it weird," Grace said, but she was still smiling. "You're my grandpa. It feels stupid to keep calling you Harrison, like you're my business associate." "I'm honored," Harrison said, his voice thick. Truly, that evening they had dinner in the kitchen, all four of them, the family that had assembled itself from broken pieces and second chances. Rosa had made pozole, and Lily talked non-stop about the recital she had coming up, how she was nervous but excited, how Grace had promised to help her pick an outfit. After dinner, Grace pulled out her phone. "I want to show you something. I've been working on it for a while." She opened a digital portfolio, dozens of drawings and paintings, each one more impressive than the last. Some were realistic portraits, others abstract expressions of emotion. But one series stood out, a collection called Invisible Hearts. "It's about people who are there but not seen," Grace explained. "Like my mum, who died before I could know her but who shaped my entire life. Like Aunt Claire, who loved me when she didn't have to. Like you, Grandpa, who spent 15 years invisible to me but who was always there, even when I didn't know it. Like all the people who love us in ways we don't recognize until later." The drawings were stunning, each one capturing the essence of love that existed in absence, in memory, in the spaces between what was said and what was felt. "These are remarkable," Harrison said. "You have your mother's talent, maybe more. I want to submit them for a young artist competition. First prize is a scholarship. I know you'd pay for art school, but I want to earn this myself. I need to know I can." "You can," Harrison said. "You absolutely can." Later, after Grace and Lily had gone to bed and Rosa had headed to the cottage, Harrison stood in the music room, looking at the Steinway that had sat silent for 15 years and now sang again. He thought about the man he'd been, the one who ate alone and punished himself and built walls so high that love couldn't reach him. He thought about the little girl who'd asked him why he ate like he was being punished and had, with that one question, begun to crack those walls apart. He thought about Margot, about the daughter he'd failed but who'd given him a chance at redemption anyway through Grace, about Claire, who'd trusted him when she had every reason not to, about Rosa, who'd shown him that grace often came in unexpected packages, about Lily, whose joy was infectious and whose wisdom belied her years. And he thought about Grace, his granddaughter, his second chance, his reminder that it was never too late to change, never too late to learn how to love better, never too late to become the person you should have been all along. The house wasn't quiet anymore. It was alive with music and laughter and the beautiful chaos of people learning to be a family. It was messy and imperfect and sometimes difficult, but it was real. It was love without conditions. It was exactly what Margot had wanted him to understand. Harrison walked to his desk and began to write, a letter to Margot that he would leave at her grave on his next visit, a letter of gratitude and apology and hope, a letter that ended with the words, "Thank you for Grace. Thank you for not giving up on the possibility that I could change. Thank you for leaving a door open, even a crack. I'm trying to be worthy of it. I'm trying to be the father you deserved and the grandfather Grace needs. I'm trying to understand that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. And I'm finally showing up. I hope wherever you are, you can see that. I hope you're proud. I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. But I'm learning. Grace is teaching me just like you tried to. Better late than never, right? Your father, Harrison." He sealed the letter, set it aside, and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was bathed in moonlight, peaceful and beautiful. A light glowed in the cottage where Rosa and Lily lived. Upstairs, Grace was probably still awake, working on her art or reading or talking to her parents the way Lily said she should, like they could hear her, like love transcended death. Harrison had been eating alone for 15 years until a child asked him one simple question, and in answering it, In opening himself to the possibility of change, he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever. He'd found family. He'd found purpose. He'd found forgiveness, both from others and slowly from himself. He'd found that invisible hearts, the ones we carry with us, the ones we love but can't see, are sometimes the most present of all. Before we close, we want to hear from you. This story of loss, redemption, and second chances touched our hearts to create. If it touched yours too, please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so you never miss a story. And most importantly, write in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Your stories, your presence, your support, they matter. You're part of this community of hearts seeking hope. From all of us to all of you, thank you for letting us share this journey. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to open a locked door. It's never too late to love better. It's never too late to show up. The end.